5 hours before our wedding, I found her with the DJ in the storage room. I lost control and punched him. Blood everywhere. Then police found something in his wallet that changed everything. The morning of my wedding day started like any other Saturday, except my stomach felt like someone had filled it with concrete and shaken it around. Miles, my best man, kept telling me it was normal wedding jitters while we grabbed coffee from the hotel lobby. The venue was only 20 minutes away, and we had planned to arrive early to handle last-minute details before the ceremony at 4. Lily had been acting strange for weeks leading up to this day. She would disappear for hours without explanation, claiming she was handling wedding preparations or meeting with vendors. When I asked specifics, she would get defensive and change the subject. Her phone was constantly buzzing with messages she would quickly dismiss, turning the screen away from me whenever I was nearby. The Riverside Manor was everything we had dreamed of when we booked it 18 months ago. Victorian architecture surrounded by manicured gardens, with a ballroom that could accommodate our 200 guests. The staff had been incredibly accommodating throughout the planning process, and everything seemed perfect on paper. We arrived at the venue around 11 that morning. The parking lot was already bustling with activity as vendors unloaded equipment and decorations. I spotted the catering trucks, the florist van, and the DJ's set-up vehicle parked near the service entrance. Everything appeared to be running smoothly according to schedule. Miles and I spent the first hour checking on various details with the wedding coordinator, Sandra, who assured us that everything was progressing beautifully. The flowers were being arranged in the main ballroom, the catering staff was prepping in the kitchen, and the sound system was being tested. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, as it seemed like our special day would go off without a hitch. Around noon, I realized I had left the rings in my car trunk, along with some emergency supplies Lily had insisted I bring. I told Miles I would be right back and headed outside to retrieve them. The parking lot was now even more crowded with guest cars arriving early, family members eager to help with preparations. As I walked back toward the main entrance with the ring box and supply bag, I heard voices coming from around the corner near the service area. One voice sounded familiar, and as I got closer, I realized it was Lily talking to someone in hushed but animated tones. She sounded upset about something, which immediately put me on alert. I followed the sound of her voice around the building toward the storage area, where vendors typically kept their extra equipment and supplies. The voices were coming from inside a small outbuilding that served as additional storage space for the venue. Through the slightly open door, I could see Lily standing close to someone, their conversation intense and secretive. My first instinct was to announce myself and ask if everything was okay, but something about the secretive nature of their conversation made me pause. I moved closer to the door, staying out of sight while trying to understand what was happening. The other voice belonged to a man I recognized as Danny, the DJ we had hired for the reception. What I witnessed next shattered everything I thought I knew about the woman I was supposed to marry in 4 hours. Lily and Danny were not discussing music or equipment issues. They were locked in an passionate embrace, their hands exploring each other with an intimacy that made my blood run cold. This was clearly not their first encounter, and the familiarity between them suggested this had been going on for some time. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow to the chest. Every strange behavior over the past few weeks suddenly made perfect sense. The mysterious disappearances, the secretive phone calls, the defensive attitude when I asked questions. She had been cheating on me with our wedding DJ, and they had chosen our wedding day to continue their affair. I stood frozen outside that storage room door, watching the woman I loved destroy our future together. The ring box felt heavy in my hand as I realized I would never get to place that band on her finger as we exchanged vows. Everything we had planned, all the dreams we had shared, crumbled in that single moment of devastating clarity. The rage that built up inside me was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It started as a burning sensation in my chest and spread throughout my entire body like wildfire. Every muscle tensed as I processed what I was witnessing, and rational thought began to slip away as primitive emotions took control. I pushed the storage room door open with enough force that it slammed against the interior wall, startling both Lily and Danny. They jumped apart like teenagers caught by their parents, but the damage was already done. The look on Lily's face was a mixture of shock, guilt, and something else I could not immediately identify. Danny was a tall, lanky guy in his early 30s with sleeve tattoos and the kind of cocky attitude that immediately rubbed me the wrong way when we first met him 6 months ago. Lily had insisted we hire him because his rates were reasonable and he came highly recommended. Now I understood why she had been so enthusiastic about bringing him onto our wedding team. The first words out of Lily's mouth were not an apology or explanation, but rather an accusation directed at me for spying on her. She claimed I had no right to follow her around and invade her privacy, completely ignoring the fact that she had been cheating on me hours before our wedding ceremony. Her defensive attitude only fueled my anger further. Danny tried to defuse the situation by claiming they were just discussing some last-minute changes to the music playlist, but his disheveled appearance and the lipstick on his collar told a completely different story. He backed toward the corner of the storage room as I stepped inside, clearly sensing the dangerous shift in my mood. I asked Lily directly how long this had been going on, and her silence was more damning than any confession could have been. She looked between Danny and me like a cornered animal, searching for an escape route that did not exist. The wedding dress bag hanging on a nearby hook seemed to mock the entire situation. Danny made the fatal mistake of trying to push past me toward the door, muttering something about this being between Lily and me. The casual dismissal of his role in destroying my life was the final straw that pushed me beyond rational thought. As he moved past me, I grabbed him by the shoulder and spun him around to face me. What happened next occurred in slow motion and lightning speed simultaneously. My fist connected with Danny's jaw with every ounce of strength and fury I possessed. The impact sent him stumbling backward toward the audio equipment he had been setting up earlier that morning. His head struck the corner of a large speaker rack with a sickening crack that echoed through the small storage space. Blood immediately began flowing from a gash on the back of Danny's head where it had impacted the metal rack. He collapsed to the floor, unconscious and bleeding heavily onto the concrete. The sight of the blood snapped me back to reality as I realized the gravity of what had just happened. Lily started screaming, but not out of concern for Danny's condition. She was screaming at me, calling me violent and unstable, claiming I had ruined everything. Her reaction confirmed that her loyalties lay with her lover rather than her fiancé, even in this moment of crisis. I knelt down to check Danny's pulse and breathing, relieved to find he was still alive, but clearly in need of immediate medical attention. The blood pool was expanding rapidly, and I knew we needed to call for help immediately. As I reached for my phone, Lily continued her verbal assault, blaming me for the entire situation. Miles appeared in the doorway, having heard the commotion from inside the venue. His expression went from confusion to horror as he took in the scene before him. Danny unconscious and bleeding, Lily hysterical, and me kneeling beside the injured man with blood on my hands. He immediately pulled out his phone to call emergency services. Within minutes, the storage room was filled with paramedics working to stabilize Danny, while police officers began questioning everyone present. The venue coordinator was trying to manage the chaos while concerned wedding guests who had arrived early gathered outside, wondering what had happened to delay the festivities. Detective Harrison was a weathered man in his 50s who had clearly seen his share of domestic violence cases gone wrong. As the paramedics loaded Danny into the ambulance, still unconscious but stable, Harrison began separating witnesses to get individual statements about what had transpired in the storage room. He took me aside first, and I explained exactly what I had witnessed and how I had reacted. I did not attempt to justify my actions or claim self-defense, accepting full responsibility for losing control and assaulting Danny. The detective listened without judgment, taking detailed notes about the timeline of events. When Harrison questioned Lily, her story took some unexpected turns that raised his eyebrows. She claimed that Danny had been harassing her for weeks, making unwanted advances and threatening to sabotage our wedding if she did not comply with his demands. According to her version, I had walked in just as she was trying to fend off another unwanted advance. Miles corroborated my account of Lily's strange behavior over the past few weeks, though he admitted he had attributed it to normal wedding stress rather than an extramarital affair. The venue staff confirmed that Lily and Danny had been seen together multiple times during planning visits, often in private conversations that seemed more personal than professional. As Harrison continued gathering information, one of the uniformed officers made a discovery that changed everything. While collecting Danny's personal effects to accompany him to the hospital, they found his wallet containing several items that immediately caught their attention. The officer called Detective Harrison over and showed him Danny's identification, along with several other cards and documents from the wallet. Harrison's expression grew serious as he examined the contents, occasionally glancing back toward where I was sitting with Miles. Harrison approached me with a manila envelope containing photocopies of what they had found in Danny's wallet. The first item was a court document showing that Danny was currently on probation for assault and battery charges stemming from an incident at another wedding venue 8 months earlier. He had attacked a groom who had complained about his unprofessional behavior. The second document was even more disturbing. Danny had a restraining order filed against him by another bride who claimed he had stalked and harassed her before and after her wedding. The pattern of behavior Lily had described was apparently Danny's standard operating procedure when working wedding events. But the most shocking discovery was a concealed carry permit and documentation showing that Danny was required to register any weapons in his possession as part of his probation terms. A search of his DJ equipment revealed a loaded handgun hidden inside one of his speaker cases, a clear violation of his probation conditions. Harrison explained that Danny's possession of the firearm while on probation was a felony that would send him back to prison for several years. The fact that he had brought the weapon to a wedding venue filled with innocent people elevated the charges even further. My assault on Danny had potentially prevented a much more serious situation. The detective's attitude toward me shifted dramatically once this information came to light. Instead of treating me as a violent offender who had lost control, he began viewing me as someone who had unknowingly neutralized a dangerous individual. He thanked me for subduing Danny before he could escalate the situation or harm other people at the venue. As the investigation continued, more details emerged about Danny's criminal background and his pattern of targeting brides and wedding parties. Several other law enforcement agencies had been investigating similar incidents at wedding venues across the state, and Danny appeared to be their primary suspect. The venue's security cameras provided additional evidence of Danny's suspicious behavior throughout the morning. Footage showed him accessing areas where he had no legitimate business, including the room where guests' personal belongings were being stored. He had been casing the venue for potential theft opportunities in addition to his harassment of Lily. Lily's story began falling apart under closer scrutiny. While Danny had indeed been harassing her, the physical evidence and witness statements suggested their relationship was more complicated than she had initially claimed. Text messages on her phone revealed she had been voluntarily meeting with Danny for several weeks, despite his aggressive behavior. As the afternoon wore on and our 4 o'clock ceremony time passed, the full scope of what had unfolded began to emerge. The 200 wedding guests had been told there was a medical emergency, and the ceremony was postponed indefinitely. Most had gone home, but close family members remained at the venue, hoping for some explanation of the chaos. Detective Harrison called me into a private conference room to discuss the final details of his investigation. The district attorney's office had reviewed the evidence and decided not to press charges against me for the assault on Danny. Given his criminal history, the illegal weapon, and the potential threat he posed to other people at the venue, my actions were deemed justifiable. Danny had regained consciousness at the hospital and was under police guard while receiving treatment for his head injury. The doctors expected him to make a full recovery, after which he would be transferred to county jail to await trial on multiple felony charges. His probation would be revoked, and he faced several years in prison. The investigation into Danny's activities revealed he had been systematically targeting wedding venues across the region. His DJ business was primarily a front for theft operations and harassment schemes. Police found evidence linking him to unsolved burglaries at reception halls and stalking complaints from at least 6 other brides. But the biggest shock was yet to come. As Harrison prepared to release me, another detective arrived with new information about Lily's involvement in the case. During their investigation of Danny's criminal network, they had discovered communications suggesting Lily had been more than just a victim of his harassment. Financial records showed that Lily had received several payments from Danny over the past 2 months, payments that coincided with her providing him detailed information about our wedding guests and their valuable possessions. She had been helping him plan theft operations targeting our own family and friends. The detective explained that Lily had initially been drawn into Danny's web through his harassment and manipulation, but had eventually become a willing participant in his criminal activities. The money he paid her was apparently more appealing than loyalty to her fiancé or concern for our wedding guests' safety. When confronted with this evidence, Lily's story changed again. She claimed Danny had threatened to hurt me if she did not cooperate with his schemes, but text messages between them suggested she was an enthusiastic partner rather than a coerced victim. Her greed had overcome any moral objections she might have had. The final revelation came when Harrison showed me copies of false statements Lily had given to police during their initial investigation. She had lied about multiple aspects of her relationship with Danny, the timeline of events, and her knowledge of his criminal activities. Filing false police reports was itself a criminal offense. As the sun set on what should have been the happiest day of my life, I watched through the conference room window as police officers led Lily away in handcuffs. She was being arrested not for adultery or breaking my heart, but for conspiracy to commit theft, filing false police reports, and accessory to multiple felonies. The irony was almost too much to process. I had discovered my fiancé's betrayal and reacted with violence that could have ruined my life, only to learn that my actions had prevented crimes against our own families and friends. The woman I thought I knew had been living a double life that went far beyond simple infidelity. Miles stood beside me as we watched the police cars drive away, taking both Danny and Lily to face justice for their crimes. The venue was now empty, except for cleanup crews removing the decorations that would never be used for their intended purpose. 200 guests had gone home with stories they would never forget about the wedding that turned into a crime scene. Detective Harrison handed me his business card and explained that I would likely be called as a witness in both Danny's and Lily's trials. The district attorney was building cases that could send both of them to prison for several years. My testimony about discovering their affair would be crucial evidence in establishing their conspiracy. The wedding dress that Lily would never wear still hung in the storage room where everything had begun. The rings I had carried so carefully that morning remained in their box, symbols of promises that would never be exchanged. The life I had planned was over, but perhaps that was for the best given what I had learned about the woman I almost married. Miles helped me gather our belongings and leave the venue that had become the scene of my personal disaster and unexpected redemption. As we drove away, I realized that discovering Lily's betrayal 5 hours before our ceremony had saved me from years of marriage to a criminal who cared more about money than love or loyalty. The investigation continued for months afterward, ultimately revealing that Danny and Lily had been part of a larger network targeting wedding venues and special events across multiple states. Their arrest led to the recovery of stolen property worth hundreds of thousands of dollars and the prevention of future crimes against innocent families celebrating their most important moments. Lily received a sentence of 3 years in prison after pleading guilty to conspiracy charges and filing false police reports. Danny was sentenced to 8 years for weapons violations, theft, stalking, and violation of probation. The judge noted that their crimes had violated the sacred trust people place in wedding vendors and caused immeasurable emotional damage to their victims. I never spoke to Lily again after that day, though I heard through mutual friends that she continued claiming she was the real victim even from prison. She apparently never accepted responsibility for her choices or showed genuine remorse for the pain she had caused. The woman I thought I loved had been a stranger all along. The punch that could have destroyed my future instead revealed the truth that saved me from a lifetime of deception. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives contain hidden blessings that only become clear with time and perspective. What felt like the end of everything was actually the beginning of a much better life built on truth rather than lies. And that's the story. If you're still here, that means you're one of us. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I drop new chaos every single day, and trust me, tomorrow's story, it's even worse than this one.